I want to take you back in time to a moment when an entire generation of leaders forged in faith, came face to face with a crisis that would shake their entire world. Now, this isn't just a story about a plague. It's a really deep look into leadership, into loss, and the incredible resilience of a community that was pushed to its absolute limit.
So to really feel the weight of this moment, you have to get your head around the numbers. The plague of Amwas, this wasn't just some minor outbreak. It was a full-blown catastrophe. We're talking over 20,000 people lost. That's nearly half of the entire Muslim community in Syria at the time. A staggering loss that didn't just take lives, it literally threatened the foundation of their whole society.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, you have leaders facing these impossible choices. Listen to these words from Umar ibn al-As, who had to step up after other great leaders had already fallen to the plague. His advice was so practical, so urgent: scatter, get to high ground, escape what he called a wildfire. In this one command, it perfectly frames the central conflict of our whole story. How do you possibly balance faith in a divine plan with the desperate, practical need to save lives?
So first up, the plague of Amwas. We're going to explore how this incredible test of faith really shaped the actions of some of history's most important figures.
Next, let's look at a scholar's final words. To really understand the mindset of the people at that time, we're going to zoom way in on the deeply personal story of the revered scholar Mu'adh ibn Jabal.
Just try to imagine this scene for a second. Mu'adh's own son is struck down by the plague, and in a moment of what must have been unimaginable pain, what does he say? Not words of despair, but words of absolute certainty. He quotes the Quran, reminding his son and probably himself that this is from God and there is no room for doubt. I mean, that is just a profound level of acceptance of the divine decree, even when you're facing the most heart-wrenching loss.
And his son's reply is just as powerful. He meets his father's faith with his own, echoing another verse from the Quran and promising to be patient. This just reveals his spiritual resilience that ran so deep in their family. This shared understanding that hardship was a test, and you meet it with patience.
Shortly after burying his son, Mu'adh himself got sick. And in his final moments, his words were just as remarkable. He didn't see death as some enemy to be feared. He called it a visitor who has come when he is most needed. It's just a statement of complete submission and trust, a belief that his purpose in life had been fulfilled.
All right, so now we turn from this deep personal faith to public policy. Let's get into the great quarantine debate and this challenge of balancing divine instruction with the duty to save lives.
Okay, so this was the foundational guidance they had to work with, a direct teaching on quarantine from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The instruction seems clear: don't go into a plagued land, and if you're already in one, don't leave just to flee. But that raised a huge question: what does it really mean to flee?
And this just lays out the dilemma perfectly. On the one hand, you have the principle, do not flee from God's decree. But on the other hand, you have this really pragmatic need to save people. Leaders like Umar ibn al-As, they argued that moving people from swampy, low-lying areas up into the mountains for fresh air, that wasn't fleeing from God. That was using the intelligence God gave them to find a medical solution and preserve life.
Now, right in the middle of this debate, another leader, the commander Abu Ubaidah, gave this powerful example. People were urging him to leave for his own safety, but he flat out refused to abandon his troops. His response just defines what it means to be a servant leader. He chose to share the same fate as his people rather than seek his own personal safety. Okay, so let's shift our focus hundreds of miles away to Medina. Here, the Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, was carrying the burden of both ultimate responsibility and just this deep personal grief. Umar's grief for his friend Mu'adh, it was more than just personal. It was for the entire community, the Ummah. He understood that when a great scholar dies, it's a devastating loss of knowledge and guidance for everyone. The true legacy of these men was their wisdom, and losing that was a public catastrophe.
And Umar, he translated this grief directly into action. He didn't just mourn, he led. He actually traveled all the way to Syria himself and began this enormous task of rebuilding. He made sure the rights of the dead were honored by dividing their inheritances. He secured the borders, which were now totally vulnerable. He appointed new leaders, reorganized the army. This was leadership as service on a massive scale.
All right, for our last section, echoes in the mountains. With the immediate crisis managed, the community now faced its next huge challenge: how to heal.
This is the story of their shared grief and how they even began to move forward.
It's a question every community has to face after a tragedy, right? After so much loss, with so many of your leaders and loved ones just gone, how do you even begin to process that kind of collective trauma and find a way to heal?
Well, the answer came in this moment of just profound emotional release. While Umar was in Syria, the people asked him to have Bilal, the Prophet's famous caller to prayer, give the call to prayer, the adhan, one last time. And as Bilal's voice rang out, the companions who had known the Prophet, they just wept uncontrollably. And the source material notes that Umar, the strong caliph, wept more than any of them. It was a moment of shared memory, shared loss, and ultimately shared healing.
So this entire episode, it really leaves us with this one powerful question. The plague was described as both a trial and a mercy. In the face of such overwhelming loss, this story suggests that mercy isn't found in escaping the trial, but somewhere inside of it, in the patience of a dying son, in the service of a leader who stayed behind, in the decisive action of a grieving caliph, and in the shared tears of a community. So where is mercy found in a trial? Perhaps it's found in the way we choose to face it.